Separation of church and state. I can't think of a statement that's become more misconstrued in our public life. As it is, the statement is used as justification to suppress religious expression, theism, or other kind of religious beliefs from the public realm, sometimes even the private realm. When people ask me, what I think about separation of church and state, I usually say, well, I believe in it, but I believe in it in the way that Thomas Jefferson meant it in his 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptists. So it's my job to kind of do my due diligence to describe that, by and large, the founders didn't have concern for religious identities, religious beliefs, mores, themes, and practices in the realm of government, but they were concerned about government encroaching in the churches. So based on that, I want to give two instances specifically that led up to the creation of that letter so that we can discuss it. The first was within 100 years of the Constitutional Convention. There's a king in England named James II. The founders were well aware of the history of this king because of how he used the churches to tax and control the people. So taking the throne in 1685, James II was a Catholic at a time where in England Catholics only made up 1/50th of the total population there. That wasn't his transgression, obviously, just being a Catholic, but he was feared because he used the church to tax and control the people in several ways. The first thing he did is expanded the government and military to accommodate new offices. He appointed new advisors to major roles within the government, mostly on the basis of their religious adherence to Catholicism, and this was against the will of the people. You could call them czars, I guess. So because of that, the people were starting to become concerned that he was going to create a vassal state within England. He adhered to Catholicism and was very close with the King of France at the time, Louis XIV, which was a cousin of his. So because of that, after doing so, that was not even considered his biggest transgression. His biggest was he started to take foreign forms of law and incorporate it into England against the will of the people. He would start to replace English law with Roman law, using the church as a conduit to get people to abide by those principles. The other thing that he did was establish the Declaration of Indulgence. What this was a declaration that was to be read at every church to pronounce the king's religious beliefs in the church, even if that was opposed to the religious teachings of the church itself. The Anglican churches got extremely mad at this situation, and it led to the Glorious Revolution of 1688, where parliamentary members asked the king's daughter, Mary II, and her husband at the time, William III, also known as William of Orange, to invade England from the Netherlands and retake the throne. The citizens were obviously very concerned about the king turning their country into a vassal state. So because of that, when the founders went to the Constitutional Convention in 1788, they were only 100 years removed by this situation where the king was deposed, that the invasion actually did occur, and William and Mary took the throne and allowed the English Bill of Rights to pass in 1689. This was a balanced constitutional effort to establish religious liberties and free exercise of religious liberties despite the will of government to intervene and intercede, interpose, and to regulate religion. So that was one instance. The other instance I want to talk about is the colonial charters. Another situation that the founders were well aware of was that our colonies were founded based on charters. Charters established our colonies, and much of the charters themselves were written with strict guidelines to adhere to a particular religion. So for instance, some colonies were chartered to respect a certain religion. Citizens of the colonies were expected to abide by those principles, and upon obtaining political office and a government job, they were to pass test acts. And what test acts were basically oaths that would pronounce your allegiance to one particular religious faith. Now, this is something that was of huge concern to some of the founders, namely James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson fought and wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom in the 1770s, which eventually passed and was incorporated to Virginia law in the 1780s. What this did was abolish the test acts. He believed in free exercise of religion rather than the pronunciation and the intervention in each individual to practice what the state would like you to practice. An extremely infamous situation arose from this because just prior to the Constitutional Convention, a Baptist minister by the name of John Leland was present in Virginia and is actually elected to serve in the Constitutional Convention as a delegate. Now, John Leland didn't want to do this. He had been a Baptist minister practicing in both Massachusetts and Virginia, but he actually didn't want to do this. He wanted to continue being a Baptist minister. But he knew Thomas Jefferson and he knew James Madison. They were actually friends. And he met with Madison and offered him his seat at the Constitutional Convention if and only if he would fight for religious freedom and free exercise. This was a predecessor to the Free Exercise Clause of the Constitution. James Madison said, yes, I will abide by that and fight for that until the end. James Madison kept his promise, and it's a good thing he did because there's no other person that became more pronounced in the Constitutional Convention as James Madison and more instrumental in the construction of the Bill of Rights later. So this is a big scenario in which it shows that the government should not intervene in religion, and the founders were very happy about that notion and happy to fight for it, but it had nothing to do with suppressing religion or preventing religion from occurring in public life. Those two things led up to the letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptists in 1802. When he wrote that letter, it was essentially a response to an inquiry by the Danbury Baptists, a group, by the way, which John Leland was associated with. The Danbury Baptists had been an organization that had been concerned about the intervention of the government in religion. The Baptists were a minority religion in many of the colonies, and they were not able to seek government jobs and things in advance in certain realms because they did not abide by the test acts. They didn't want to abide by oaths which they considered contradictory to their own religion. Well, Thomas Jefferson had been known for his adherence to free exercise liberties when it came to the church, and because of the Virginia statute for religious freedom, they thought that once he became the president, would he still be fighting for these beliefs? Would he still adhere to the limitations on government and interceding into the church? They were wondering about that. By and large, that is considered by Jefferson himself to be one of his biggest accomplishments, so much so that he lists it amongst three things on his tombstone, that he was the father of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedoms. So when Jefferson sent them the letter dated January 1st, 1802, he had said that, yes, I still will fight for the free exercise of religion. That is what erects a wall of separation between church and state. It is not the suppression of religion in the realm of government. It is the encouragement of religion. Just to give a few examples to kind of end today about why the founders were not highly concerned about religious influence in their lives is, for one, the U.S. Capitol building was a church on Sundays. It was non-discriminatory, but it had even started before the Congress had moved there from Philadelphia. On Sundays, various different ministers would preach, and presidents would attend, namely Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, famously so. But this practice continued throughout the course of history until after the Civil War. Another thing is that the Continental Congress set aside days in which the nation should pray. John Locke's two treatises of government became something of political gospel to the founders, where he basically said that when all other attempts to obtain justice have been exhausted, only an appeal to heaven remains. So there's countless situations where you can point to certain situations where the founders proved that they had no concern about religious theism in their daily lives, or as it is in influencing government, but for sure they were starkly opposed to the pronunciation of government within religion and the churches.